Welcome to the third and final episode in this series of Twilio Talks. I'm Peter Bell, VP of Marketing at Twilio, and for those of you who've tuned into the previous episodes, you'll have seen myself speaking with Thomas from TravelPerk and Sam Richardson, our Executive Engagement Lead at Twilio, talking to Ramnik from BJS, both of whom had benefited from their investment in Flex and shared what they learned along the way. But I'm especially looking forward to today's episode, as Sam and I are here to talk with Age UK and their trusted system integrator, Zing. Before we start, remember to let us know that you're engaged. Please send us your emojis throughout this episode. Sam, how have you found Twilio Talks?
Really great, actually, Peter. I especially enjoyed my chat with Ramnik, of course, but it was also interesting to hear your conversation with TravelPerk and how they've used the Flex solution to really create this seamless customer experience for their customers. I actually can't wait to hear what our guests today have to share with us, though, because I heard that Age UK delivered an incredible 242% increase in volunteer numbers following their move to Flex.
That's an incredible number, and it's also just humbling to hear how Twilio is helping a cause so close to many of our hearts. But rather than us tell that story, shall we ask them to join us?
Absolutely, Peter. Let's do that. Alasdair, Julian, do you mind introducing yourselves to everybody that's viewing today?
Thank you. I'm Alasdair Stewart. I'm Age UK's Director of National Services.
Hi, I'm Julian Hucker. I'm the CEO at Zing Dev Limited.
Fantastic, and welcome to both of you. Alasdair, how about we start with you and you tell us who Age UK are?
Age UK is the country's leading charity supporting older people. We work locally through over 120 network partners, nationally and internationally through our charitable subsidiary Age International, where we work in over 30 developing countries supporting older people around the world.
Wow, that's incredible. And what drove this initiative?
So as Age UK, we support about 7 million people every year with different information and advice queries. We also campaign and we do research to try and support and improve the situation for older people in the UK. We've got 3 large telephone services, one of them an advice line, open every day of the year, 8 a.m. till 7 p.m, providing advice to older people, but also their friends, families, carers, other people supporting them with benefits issues, making sure they're getting all the support from government that they're entitled to, maybe housing issues, either moving into sheltered accommodation, how to access funding and resources to adapt their home to make it more accessible and ensure they can stay in their home for longer. So we get about 500,000 queries every year through our different services. We also run our 24/7 helpline, the Silverline helpline, where we're just there for a chat any time of the day or night. It might be a good morning or a good evening. So during the pandemic, our services were needed more than ever before. Demand was going through the roof. Older people were one of the most affected groups. People had lots of questions. They were often on their own, perhaps living alone. They didn't have a husband or wife anymore. So we were there at the end of a phone for them. Our staff, of course, couldn't be in the office. We weren't allowed to do that. So they were instead at home. They had cables trailing through their houses. Our telephony systems at that point were just really not geared up for staff working for any sort of length of time at home. Our systems were all designed for people being in 2 of our contact centres, one in the northwest of the UK and one in the south. So we really recognised that we needed a solution that could enable us to sustain our really vitally important services and make sure that our staff could do so in a good way that worked for them without tying up their landline phone, which was the situation for lots of them.
That sounds incredibly complicated and obviously also high impact. How did you start the process of change? How did you, this is operationally complex, we're in COVID. Where did you begin?
Well, our challenge is very clear. If we were going to be working from home for any extended period, we needed a new solution. And we were coming up to a decision point. Our existing on-premise contract was nearing the end, and we could either renew it for another period of time and use that time to change, or be quite bold and brave and say, no, we can make a change and we can do it really quickly and make sure we get that positive change for our staff much sooner. We had some credit in the bank. We'd managed to roll out laptops and get everyone operational at home, sustaining our services. So myself and our Director of IT said, no, we can make this change and it's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do for our staff and indeed the right thing to do for our callers. So we looked at the market. We went out, spoke to some existing suppliers. Twilio were already a trusted partner for one of our services. So we looked at Flex and understood what you were offering there. We talked to other charities. What were they using? What had they found maybe worked better at home? I went to Gartner to understand, what are the leading suppliers in the market doing? And we came up with a plan. We then spoke to Twilio and said, if we do want to do this, how do we go about it? We don't have any developer resource in-house at Age UK, so it was very clear to us that we would need a developer partner to build on what Flex provided. We were introduced to Zing, who seems to be the right kind of organisation at the right scale and size, and importantly specialism for us. They specialised in Twilio Flex. And we decided that there were some great partners that we could go ahead with. And we essentially convinced everyone internally it was the right thing to do. We didn't want the cables trailing around our staff houses anymore. We wanted a solution that was really fit for purpose. It was the right thing to do. And importantly, the cost stacked up. One of the important things for us is the pay-per-use model of Twilio. We're not having to purchase named users or user licenses. We literally pay per hour. So whether we've got a member of staff there or a volunteer for 2 hours a week or 20, our costs scale in direct proportion to how we're using it, which is also very attractive compared to some of the other products on the market.
And I was just going to bring you back to something you said a moment ago, which was, it just made sense. Organisations, common sense doesn't always prevail. How did you get the buy-in to go ahead with this? Because it's not always easy.
No, well, as I said, we had some credit in the bank from having delivered lots of change very quickly. We obviously had to produce a business case, looking at the finances of it. With Twilio Flex, there is a higher upfront investment in our case. We wanted to develop and build on what was there already to get the right functionality for our users. And we were able to compare it to the market and say, nope, it stacks up financially. And we had sort of the recovery plan. We knew that if it went wrong, we could always switch back to our existing systems and keep using that. We also did it in a very phased and hopefully sensible way to give us confidence that what we were doing was the right thing. So we moved our sort of generic customer service and our 365-day-a-year services first, and then we moved our 24/7 operation following that. Once we'd proven and demonstrated that the platform worked, it was delivering exactly what we had hoped and intended to, and therefore the confidence to make that big switch. Because for us, for the older people that we're supporting, we are there every hour of every day for them. It's really important that they can pick up the phone and know there is someone there on the end of the line. And we wanted to make sure that as part of this change, nothing went wrong with that we were still there exactly as we should be, and we are. And I'm very pleased to say that that's indeed what happened. It was an entirely seamless change with no interruption to any of our services.
And what took you to, or attracted you to Flex, which is, after all, a customizable solution versus just taking an off-the-shelf solution?
So we've always been a bit of sort of a square peg in a round hole environment. Our contact centres are delivering a service to older people or their friends and families. It's not a sales operation. We're not there just delivering customer service as sort of a cost centre. The conversation that we have on the phone with someone is the product and service that we're offering. And because of the types of inquiries and the types of people, we do have some slightly different needs. So we've always had to compromise with previous solutions. We get maybe 80% of what we need. We can afford to build and customize a bit more. The beauty of Flex is there was an interface there that we could build on. There was all the key core functionality that we needed. And then it was entirely practical and possible for us, even a charity where budgets are limited, to engage someone like Zing and say, these are the key features that we need to have day one, and these are the features that we need going forward. So we were able to plan and actually get a solution that, for the first time in our case, actually met all of our needs. We weren't having to compromise. And that for us was really important for our staff. They do such an incredible job, and we need to make sure that they are empowered with the best tools and the right tools for their job. And it was very clear to us that Twilio Flex would enable us to do that.
Thank you. And you've mentioned your partnership with Zing. Before I bring Julian in, what drove that selection process? Why Zing?
Well, as Age UK, we do work with a whole range of different sized organisations, from single person, small businesses, up to big four accounting and consulting companies, and everything in between. For this piece of work, we were working to a very tight deadline. We had decided to do something quite bold and brave, and we needed a partner that was agile, that understood where we're coming from, what we needed to achieve, and brought that specialist knowledge to the table that we didn't have in-house. to turn our dreams and vision and our requirements into something that was then built on top of Flex and would enable our staff and volunteers to go and deliver that vitally important service. So it was very obvious early on from engaging with Julian and his team that they got it, they were the experts, and they were the right size of organisation for us to deal with. We didn't have to spend months on sort of working out the terms of engagement and all the legals. We actually managed to deal with that very easily because we were sort of the right size for each other at that time. And crucially, you have the developer resource available to meet the ambitious timeline that we're looking to deliver within.
So, Julian, that is a ringing endorsement.
Thank you, Alasdair.
Perhaps you could tell us, first of all, just a little more about Zing.
Of course. Zing is a pure-play Twilio build consultancy. We founded the organisation several years ago just to build solutions for Twilio's customers. And under our Business for Good initiative, we're finding an increasing amount of our work is in the charity sector and the international humanitarian sector. But we work globally, and we work across a wide range of sectors and industries.
And do you see a lot of projects like this? Is it common or uncommon? Is the sense of urgency always there?
We're seeing an increasing number of projects like this. I think Age UK had some particular urgency, which created some particular challenges, but ultimately I think that was one of the reasons why it was so successful, in that we were all wholly aligned on where we needed to get to. But yeah, absolutely, we are seeing more and more customers going down this journey and taking the iterative approach that Age UK took so successfully.
Yeah. Now, the whole charity sector is relatively conservative. Flex is obviously a cloud-based solution. What are the common misperceptions that you find when recommending cloud-based solutions into quite a conservative sector like this?
I think Age UK is actually far from conservative, and I think what they did was very bold. I think in the old world there was a fear of the Big Bang, that everything needs to be changed at once. And what a solution like Flex does, and the development approaches that we take, allow us to do is focus on the highest value items first, so that the customer gets the greatest value as quickly as possible. And we're very clear that wherever possible, that solution needs to be delivered without a break in service. And I think if you're taking a staged approach, that's much easier to implement.
Now, one of the things about this specific project, of course, is the thing that will surprise people is the timelines that were just described. Incredibly ambitious, I think was the phrase used. What would surprise people about the project having to roll so quickly?
It was literally done within weeks. We love a challenge. Everybody loves a challenge. That was particularly challenging. I think what it did do, though, was forge some relationships in the heat of that process that have gone on to hold us in good stead going forwards. So we wouldn't necessarily have chosen those deadlines, but we accepted the challenge. And with the team at Age UK, we're delighted that we could deliver, and we did crucially deliver without that break in service.
And obviously, despite being sort of a testing project, it's gone very well. What advice would you give people coming out of that experience?
I think be very clear about the most valuable items first. Bring in a broad team of testers. Be very clear about getting the feedback. But also, as I say, have a roadmap, but be very clear about what you want to get done first.
Okay.
Great. It's such a great story. And obviously the numbers speak for themselves. Alasdair, we saw this 242% increase in volunteers as a result of switching system. What else have you seen?
Well, I think as was said there, failing fast was not an option for us. We had to make sure it was an entirely seamless switch with no interruption to any of our services. And I'm very pleased that's exactly what we're able to deliver. We've also been able to iterate over time. So with traditional models, you would deploy a solution and you're kind of stuck with it. And then the staff come up with great ideas about, oh, this would make my life easier. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And we've been able to deliver that. We've had further sprints and extra development to bring in those extra bits of functionality based on feedback from our staff teams. We've also introduced not just the telephony channels, but also web chat. We've had a chatbot, a virtual assistant on the Age UK website for a number of years. And it was always an ambition of ours that one day we would connect it up with one of our really highly trained specialist human advisors when the bot can't cope anymore. And the beauty of Flex and the fact it is all based on APIs and entirely customizable, it is an entirely seamless experience for our website users. One moment they're in the interface, chatting to a virtual assistant. They either say that they're not getting what they need, or the bot itself recognises this is a bit specialist, let's get you speaking to a human advisor. And within that same interface, with no obvious change, it's immediately connected in to Flex. One of our agents is able to join. The agent is able to see the transcript of what they've been talking before and literally pick up the conversation with no interruption, entirely seamlessly. We're very proud that pretty much immediately on deploying that on our website, that we were being rated 4.2 out of 5 stars by our users, which we really hadn't expected. We thought we would need time to refine and improve, because it's a different medium, text versus telephone. But we've continued now to iterate on that, finding better ways to improve the experience for our staff teams, but also for our website users. But I think one of the really interesting outcomes we had was one that we weren't really expecting, and that was really increasing our number of volunteers. In the past, we'd been tied down to 2 specific locations in the UK. People had to go in to answer the calls. It wasn't really possible for volunteers to do it on any sort of scale. You had to live locally, it had to fit in with your life, your work commitments, everything else. With Flex, it's the same experience whether you're working in an office, from home, or indeed anywhere else in the UK. So we're able to open up our offering to a much wider group of volunteers throughout the country and say, we've got this need where older people really enjoy and appreciate a 15, 20-minute chat. Can you generously give your time to have a conversation with them? Ideally a couple hours a week, fit it around your schedule, more if you can. And we were really overwhelmed by the positive response from people across the UK who've been willing to give up their time. And we've had great experiences where people who perhaps were a TV producer but furloughed during the pandemic, or back office bank staff, that brought an entirely different set of backgrounds and life experiences to those telephone calls. Just backgrounds that we wouldn't have sort of benefited from and had within our staff team. And that changed the nature of the conversations, particularly during the pandemic when it was wall-to-wall coverage of what was going on, the latest facts and figures. It was really difficult for older people to escape from that, because often they are housebound. They don't, perhaps are digitally enabled in the same way that some of us might be. So for them, the telephone was a great lifeline. And they were to call us and speak to someone and find out about their travels and how they'd worked in different countries. Just a real diversity and just broadening of the types of conversation that we had. And looking back in it now, it's an entirely obvious outcome of what we were able to achieve. But it wasn't one that we thought of, probably due to the pace of what we were working at. But it really just changed the nature and really added some real great value to that service that we're able to offer. And I think it's probably one of the biggest lasting impacts of the change.
Sounds like this goodness is rippling out. So, really ambitious project, as we've heard about, and it's a fascinating project as well. What lesson did you learn from it?
That we can actually deliver really big change in a very short period of time. I think, the typical model is an awful lot of planning, a lot of research. You line everything up often months in advance. And before the pandemic, if someone had told me that we would change our entire telephony stack in about 10 weeks, I'd said, that's never going to happen. But that's what we achieved and delivered. We've then iterated since and continued to improve. So I think it's be bold and ambitious. Make sure you do the groundwork, the business case. Make sure you know if something's go wrong, how you're going to recover from it. But don't be turned off and put off by a challenging timeline, particularly if you've got a very willing and brilliant partner alongside you, enabling you to achieve that vision.
Fantastic. And Julian, your team does many of these projects. Was there anything in particular that you learned from the experience working with Age UK?
I'm not sure whether we learned or we proved that obviously Alice has talked about how your agents are able to work anywhere as a cloud-based development company. We live globally, we work globally. But we couldn't have succeeded if we hadn't worked as closely with the Age UK team. And I think the old days of development teams working in a silo and delivering something that just doesn't work anymore. And I think that's baked into our development processes now. The more closely we work with our customer, the more successful the project will be.
Fantastic. Okay, we had some great pieces of advice from you earlier. I want to come to you, Alasdair. If there are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to business leaders embarking on a transformation, what would they be?
I think most importantly, don't forget the power of the telephone. I think it's all too easy these days to think digitally first and self-service, But when people need that conversation, the telephone is the medium to deliver it. Twilio Flex is great at that. It's its primary channel for us, particularly given our target audience, and making sure that our teams answering those calls have the right technology, the right systems that support their roles, enables them to go on and deliver that great customer service, that great positive experience to older people or their friends and families when they're engaging with us. All of our metrics in terms of customer satisfaction have remained the same. You know, no one has seen the issue. It has been an entirely seamless change for them. No one is aware of what we've been doing in the background, and that for me is obviously one of the really important takeaways as well, that you can deliver really positive change without any obvious issues or anything going wrong.
Fantastic.
Well, look, Alasdair, Julian, thank you so much for making the time for us today. It's a fantastic story. We all love those sorts of heartwarming stories. It's a business story. It's a social story. It's a story about overcoming the very worst of COVID. And just thank you for sharing this story here today. So, before we wrap up our third and final episode in this series of Twilio Talks, I'd just like to say on behalf of Sam and I, a thank you to all of our customers and partners who've taken the time to share their stories and experiences with us.
Yeah, I second that, Peter, and to all of our viewers for tuning in as well. Throughout this series, our goal has been to inspire you by hearing from some incredible stories from our customers who've delivered, quite frankly, outstanding results by taking a very employee and customer-centred approach to their transformation. We're always motivated by the successes of our customers, and if you've been inspired today as well, then let us help you tell a success story as strong as the ones we've heard on Twilio Talks. Until next time, it's goodbye from Peter and I.
And thank you, and everyone, have a great day.